I will never forget that morning at the dog shelter. A dark corridor, the smell of dampness, and the barking of dozens of dogs from all sides. My husband and I walked behind our daughter, Emma, trying not to lose sight of her in all that noise and chaos. Emma walked slowly, stopping at each cage, looking carefully, and then moving on in silence. She had not said a single word since that morning, just as she had not for the past 4 years. At the very end of the corridor, in a far dark corner, there was the last cage. A shelter worker, an older woman named Karen, quietly told us that no one had wanted to take this dog for a long time. A border collie named Mia was lying in the corner, turned away from the bars, not reacting to sounds, people, or anything at all. Emma walked right up to the cage and stopped. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then my daughter, who had not spoken for 4 years, quietly but clearly said 2 words, "Come here." Mia lifted her head, slowly stood up, and walked straight to the bars, right to Emma. Karen froze in place. My husband grabbed my hand so tightly that it hurt. And I just stood there, unable to even take a breath. Mia stood by the bars and looked at Emma. And I stood there thinking about how long it had taken us to reach this moment. Emma had been a talkative, noisy, laughing child when she was born. She started saying her first words earlier than expected, and the pediatrician always told us that her speech development was excellent. At home, she never stopped talking for even a minute. She commented on everything around her, asked questions, and sang little made-up songs to herself. My husband and I sometimes joked that she would talk the whole world to exhaustion. Everything changed on one ordinary day when Emma was 2 years old. We were walking in a park near our home. Emma was running along the path ahead of me, and I looked away for a second to answer a message. A crow dropped down without a sound suddenly, like a shadow from the sky. It beat its wings, pecked Emma on the cheek, and got tangled in her hair. It all lasted only a few seconds, but Emma screamed in a way I had never heard before and never heard again. I ran up, drove the bird away, picked my daughter up, and held her close. The scratch on her cheek was small. I thought everything would be fine. But the next morning, Emma did not say a single word. I thought she was just scared. A day passed, then a week, then a month. The words did not come back. Doctors explained it in different ways. Some talked about selective mutism, others about a serious psychological trauma, and others sent us to speech therapists and child psychologists. We went to appointments twice a week for 2 years. The specialists were attentive and professional, but the result was always the same. Emma sat there, looked at them calmly, and did not make a single sound. At home, she understood everything. She followed requests, nodded, shook her head, and used gestures. She was a smart, attentive, lively girl, just without a voice. We learned to communicate with her in a way that did not require her to answer with words. Gradually, this became our normal, although inside I never truly accepted it. Emma was 5 years old when, one evening, she was sitting by the window, looking outside. Below, a neighbor was walking with a big, shaggy dog. Emma pressed her forehead against the glass, and suddenly, very quietly, almost in a whisper, said, "Dog." I was standing in the doorway and did not immediately understand what I had heard. I asked again. Emma fell silent and did not repeat it. A few weeks later, there was a program about animals on TV. A shepherd dog appeared on the screen, and Emma suddenly said, "Big." My husband jumped up from the couch and looked at me with wide eyes. We both froze, afraid to scare something fragile. This happened only with dogs. Only when looking at them would she sometimes say 1 or 2 words, and then fall silent again. Not with people, not with other animals, not in any other situation. Only dogs. Our new psychologist, a young woman named Sarah, listened to us carefully and suggested something that took my breath away. She said that maybe we should take Emma to an animal shelter just to be around dogs without any pressure or expectations. My husband said no right away. I was against it too. After that crow incident, we had avoided any animals near our daughter for years. The very thought of bringing her into a place full of unfamiliar dogs seemed reckless to us. But Sarah gently reminded us that dogs were the only thing that made Emma speak, and in the end, we agreed. That morning, when we arrived at the shelter, I held Emma's hand tighter than usual. Karen met us at the entrance and immediately said that we could leave at any moment if Emma felt uncomfortable. Inside, it was noisy. Dogs were barking, doors were slamming, and staff were calling out to each other across the corridor. I leaned down to Emma and asked if she was okay. She nodded and took a step forward. She walked along the cages slowly and with focus. A golden retriever jumped against the bars and whimpered. Emma looked at him and kept walking. A small terrier ran around inside its cage and barked. She paused for a second and then moved on. Dog after dog, cage after cage. No words, no reaction. My husband quietly squeezed my shoulder, and I felt that he was thinking the same thing I was, that we had come here for nothing. The corridor was coming to an end. There was one last cage in the far dark corner. Karen came up to us and quietly explained that this dog had been brought in 3 months ago. A border collie named Mia did not react to staff, visitors, or other animals. She ate very little, barely moved, and spent all her time lying in the corner, turned away from people. Several families had shown interest in her, but after seeing her behavior, they left. Karen spoke softly and calmly, but there was something in her voice that I could not name at first. It was that special kind of tiredness you hear in people who have long been caring for those others have already given up on. Emma walked up to the cage and stopped. Mia was lying in the corner with her back to us. 1 second passed, then another, then a third, and then Emma, quietly and completely calmly, said, "Come here." Mia lifted her head, slowly stood up, and walked straight to the bars, straight to Emma. She stopped right by the bars and looked at my daughter with dark, attentive eyes. Emma reached her hand through the bars and gently touched her head. Mia did not pull away. She slightly tilted her head and leaned into the small hand. Karen stood next to us and did not move. Her colleague, a young man named Tom, came out of a nearby door, saw what was happening, and stopped as well. My husband turned away. I knew he did not want me to see his tears. And Emma stood by the bars and smiled. Not politely, not uncertainly, but truly and widely, with her whole face. The way she had not smiled for a very long time. I do not remember which of us started crying first. While we stood by the cage, Karen quietly stepped aside and returned a few minutes later with a folder. She opened it and began to read first silently, then out loud to us. Mia's story turned out to be short and harsh. 1 year ago, her owner, a middle-aged man, brought her to the shelter and said one word before leaving. Broken. He explained that a few months earlier, during a thunderstorm, Mia had been so frightened by a clap of thunder that she ran out of the house and spent several days outside alone. After that, she stopped responding to his commands, stopped eating the way she used to, and stopped coming to him. He decided that something was wrong with the dog and brought her to the shelter. Karen closed the folder and looked at Emma, who was still standing by the bars, stroking Mia through them. Then she looked at us and said slowly, "She is not broken. She was just scared, and she shut down. She was waiting for someone who would understand that." I did not know if Karen was talking about the dog or about our daughter. I think she was talking about both. We wanted to take Mia home that same day. But Karen explained that we needed to complete the paperwork, go through a standard check, and wait a few days. It was right and understandable, but Emma did not want to leave. When my husband gently took her hand and said that it was time to go, she did not scream or fall to the floor like children often do. She simply turned toward the cage and looked at Mia for a long moment. Then she took a step, stopped, and turned back, once more, already from the turn of the corridor. Mia was still standing by the bars, watching her. And only then did tears begin to run down Emma's cheeks, quietly, without sobbing. In 4 years of silence, Emma had never cried because she wanted something. She cried only from fear. But now she was crying because she did not want to be separated from the dog, and this was something completely different. Mia came into our home 4 days later. During the first week, she almost never left the corner of Emma's room where we had placed her bed. She ate little, moved carefully, and kept watching everything around her with cautious eyes. Emma did not rush her or try to pull her closer. She simply sat on the floor nearby and did her own things, flipping through a book, drawing, stacking blocks. She behaved as if they were simply living side by side, and that alone was enough. On the 5th night, the baby monitor camera turned on. My husband and I woke up from the alert and took the phone. On the screen, we saw Emma sitting on the floor next to Mia's bed in the dark, quietly talking to her. We could not hear the words. We could only see her lips moving. Mia lay beside her, looking at her calmly, without looking away. My husband turned off the screen and lay there in silence for a long time. Then he said, "Let's not disturb them," and I agreed. 3 months passed. By then, Mia had long stopped hiding in corners. She greeted Emma at the door when she came home from kindergarten, followed her around the house, and slept by her bed every night. She turned out to be gentle and attentive. She never jumped or made noise. She was simply always there, like a quiet shadow. Emma was blooming with her. At first, she began to speak to Mia in front of us calmly, without hesitation, as if the words had always been there and were simply waiting for their moment. Then one evening, she came up to me while I was cooking dinner and said, "Mom, Mia wants to eat." I set the pan aside, knelt down in front of her, and hugged her so tightly that she laughed and asked me to let her go. It was the first time in 4 years that I heard her loud, childlike laughter. 1 month later, our daughter began answering questions at kindergarten, at first with 1 word, then with 2, then with full sentences. Her teacher called us that evening. Her voice was both excited and happy. She said that today Emma had raised her hand in class and answered a question out loud. The teacher added that she simply could not help but call. About 6 months after that day at the shelter, Karen called us just to ask how things were. I picked up the phone and said, "Please wait a second." Then I called Emma. Emma took the phone, was silent for a second, and said, "Hello, this is Emma." Karen did not answer on the other end. Only after a long pause did I hear that she was quietly crying. When I later asked Emma why Mia had helped her start speaking, my daughter thought for a moment and answered simply, "Because she was scared too, and she still came closer." For 4 years, doctors and psychologists did everything they could, and they truly tried. But what medicine could not do in 4 years, a small dog from a dark corner of a shelter did in 1 night. Because Mia did not see Emma as a patient who needed to be treated, she saw someone who understood her without words. And sometimes, that is exactly where real healing begins.